Hello everyone, welcome to part 13 of this series. In this video we're setting up the use of a bow. This will be the same set of buttons as we use for the sword for pretty much every action. So we'll be using some conditions to make all of this work. Before we start, I would like to thank all of my Patreon supporters for the amazing support. The scene will be made available on Patreon. So we're going to start off by actually placing the bow. Now this is not necessarily the first step, it just makes sense to me. Now because we have already set up how to pick up a sword, this is actually going to be quite easy in comparison. So I'm going to reduce the radius of pickup a bit. It's just a bit too large and it can overlap with other things. And then what we're going to do next up is we're going to duplicate this and just rename it pick up bow. Now we do need something, so when we go to preferences we will need a couple of things here. So first off, just like we created a bool as a global variable for sword equipped, we will need one for bow equipped as well. So literally the same, just bow equipped. And in our inventory module we'll need a bow as well. Now the easiest way to do this really is to simply duplicate the bow, the sword, sorry about that. So literally duplicate it. Then we have a new sword, so you name it bow. And for the sprite, I just used one of the ones that was in the fantasy bundle. So there's a lot of options. I think I used the first one or second one. Can't really remember. Just one of the sprites. And if you don't have the fantasy bundle, just, use a different sprite. So once we've added the sprite, you can add the weight and the price to your own preference, doesn't really matter. Item type is going to be the same because it is still a weapon. And equip sword on invoker needs to be our new bow. On equip, we're going to change this to a bow. Now I've added a link in the description where you can download a free Cinti Polygon bow asset that is on their website, and that's the one we're going to pick up. So not really sure how it's called again, bow. There we go. So the rigged bow Native American testing. And if you have different models, please go ahead. I wasn't able to find anything else really in the Cinti assets that were that actually had bows. I know the Fantasy Kingdom asset does have bows, so if you already have that one, you can use one of those as well. Now one big difference with positioning is that this needs to be -20, and we're going to change this to bow equipped. On unequip, this remains the same, and we're again changing this to bow equipped. So really simple because we've already set up our sword before and it's just really similar, so not that much is different. So considering I already have one, I'm going to remove this new one I made and I'm going to use this one. So exactly the same. And yeah, that's it. So that's it for the inventory part. So let's go to our settings. So we have our triggers and conditions. So we have a trigger for on player enter. All of these remain the same, so none of this changes. We already set that up before. The only thing we need to change is the conditions. Now in the conditions we will need to, let's actually drag this here on our second crate. And we'll need to add our bow here. That's one. So set active pickup remains the same. And yeah, that's it really. So that's all we really need to do. Now obviously we'll need a new model as well, so that's going to be the same model we're attaching to the player. And I dragged it in, where did I drag it in? There we go. I dragged it in here. So yeah, let's do it like this. Rotate it 90 degrees. There we go. And just drag it up a bit. To make it slightly more interesting, I am obviously going to rotate it a bit. Don't want it to be in the exact same position, that's a bit lame. And there we go. I'll remove the sword. I am going to add one addition here though, as this is completely optional obviously, but I'm just going to add 2 arrows to this pickup. They will disappear together with the bow once we pick it up, and that's just because by default I just want to have a couple of arrows as, you know, ammo available, and that's optional. You can have that separate. I think it's just, you know, better to have something already ready and you have at least some ammo. And yeah, you don't have to do that, you can have it separate if you want, but I'm going to include that with the pickup, so they'll disappear together with the bow if we actually pick them up. So completely optional, but I personally do prefer doing that. Now you might guess that we do need to add an action for that, so on pickup we're going to add ammo, so give ammo, arrow, and yeah, I'll add 10, that's fine. So it's not a lot of ammo, but it's something you can change this value, so if you want it to be a bit less, literally 2 for example, as can be seen here, that's fine as well, you know. Go ahead, do whatever makes you happy. So next up would be to actually set up that bow and arrow. So the shooter module already has a bow, and all I really did here, because I'm not using the default, and you know, you can duplicate it if you feel more comfortable with that, but I just opened this up and went to the 3D model, and I just dragged in that same bow as we use as a model, and just, you know, drag that in and remove the old one. And I did the exact same thing for the arrow, so turn that on temporarily, drag in the arrow in the right place, so move it a bit, and yeah, just make sure it's turned off again. And that's it really. You know, it's just literally replacing the model. The fit was fine in my opinion. If you do want to improve the fit, obviously go ahead and do that. So open up the bow again and adjust these position a bit. I was fine with the fit, but if you think it's not good enough, adjust these positions. So that's it when it comes to the model, that's it when it comes to actually using the bow. Now we need to make sure that in terms of combat, all of our actions are actually correct. So we have some actions for equipping and combat. So I'll start off with combat. And we're going to make this slightly more complex, not all that much. We can close these, that's blocking is not going to change. And we're going to add a new trigger, just the one. I'm going to drag it up just to group everything together. And there we go. I'm not really sure why there's a second one here. That's interesting. Can't remember why I had a second one, but yeah, that can go. So our trigger will be key up, and it will be keypad 4. Now obviously you can change these, you know, the buttons you're using to whatever you want. I personally do feel it's nice that they're the same buttons, so you know, you don't really have a more complex system. So I'm going to use what we use for blocking for aiming and what we do for melee attacks for shooting. So I'm going to use the same buttons. That's what I'll show and demonstrate as well. If you want to use different buttons, you know, just use different buttons. It's completely up to you. So we're going to start off with our first trigger. Now all of these will need to become conditions. So I'm going to add conditions to all of these except for this one. And these will need to be conditions, and that's it. Yeah, we don't need to change the perfect block. So let's go to our first one, and I'm going to rename this to melee shoot. So this will group melee and shooting, and this set of actions, that is input melee, I'm going to drag it as a child of these conditions. And let's add a condition. Now this is quite important, and it's a little detail. So if you're going to look up is armed or something like that, you can either be pulling up melee or shooter. So I would really suggest manually choosing it, because when you go to melee and shooter, you basically have pretty much the same action. And especially when you add it, I'm pretty sure the name is the same. So these are both, and yeah, they have the same name. So I would definitely suggest manually doing that, just to make sure you're doing the correct thing. So we're going to drag the melee in here, and we're going to start off with our condition for shooting. So shooter is armed, really simple. And then we're going to do shooter and weapon start charging shot. Now it's start charging shot because it's a bow, it's not a gun, so it actually needs to charge. And yeah, that's why we're doing that. Now, as you might have guessed, we had created a new set of actions which we haven't used yet, and this will be release shot. And we're going to go to shooter, and we're going to do weapon execute charging shot. Really simple. So we're going to do something really similar for the next condition. So I just want to make sure I'm selecting the right ones. And yeah, remove this set of actions here. We're only executing this one. So for the next one, key up. We set that up correctly. It's really shot. We're good there. And then here we need to set up the new ones. And this is basically going to be for aiming. So let's rename these, and we're going to do block aim. And let's rename these straight away as well. Stop, block, aim. Now that's a nice thing. It's actually really similar. This letting go will be a stopping action for both blocking and aiming, and this will be a starting action for both blocking and aiming. So it's pretty nice at least. So I'm going to drag these actions in here, and we're going to drag these actions in here. Let's set up a clause. And yeah, now I'm not listening to my own advice. Let's make sure I do it right. So is armed, and this is the shooter armed. We're going to use aiming, and it will be at camera direction. That's what I'm using. Now you can use other options as well, obviously, but I'm going to use aim camera direction. Let's drag these ones. Let's drag these ones here. So let's start blocking. And for stop blocking, it will be again really similar. So shooter is armed, create. I'm going to drag these in here. So stop blocking, and this will be stop aiming. So yeah, pretty similar. Now I'm going to add one little detail though. I do prefer having a different camera motor. So I'm going to duplicate the default one. When I start aiming, I do want it to be a bit more up close. So camera motor bow, going to change the zoom to 2, and I'm going to change the offset to 1. So we'll be a lot more to the left. You can play with these values, that's completely up to you. And then when we go to aiming, we're going to add camera change camera, and let's drag in the bow. I'm going to add a transition time of 0.5, and I'm adding one more action, which is reload weapon. Now, quite important, this is completely optional, but personally I prefer not having a manual reload button for my bow. If I remember correctly, Zelda doesn't have that either, but I could be wrong there. So by default, when we start aiming, he will reload the weapon. If we're already reloaded, he will literally skip this action. So there's no conflict or anything like that. And it's pretty nice not having to use yet another button to complicate things. Again, that's optional, but when it comes to a bow, you don't really have a mag anyway. So there's not really a benefit of having a separate reload button. But yeah, it's up to you. So when we go to stop blocking, obviously we're going to change camera again. So let's copy that over. And we're going to go here, I'm going to add it, and we're dragging in the default one. Now I do want this transition time to be a bit faster. I think when you start, it actually is nice if there's a bit of a longer transition, but when you stop, it needs to be a lot faster, in my opinion. So yeah, that's a lot of the basics already set up. Now, when it comes to equipping, it is going to be a bit more complex, just a tiny bit more. So when we go to equipping, we have our default conditions here. So all related to our melee weapon. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to duplicate this set. And we're going to name the first one conditions melee, and the second one conditions bow. Now if you're wondering if you have to do all of this for every different variation of a sword or bow we have, I'm definitely going to, do a system where that won't be the case. However, when it comes to really different archetypes like these, it is useful to actually have a different system. So that's why we have melee, and we're going to go to these conditions. So pressing it once. So yeah, let's go over how this works again. So if we're pressing it and we're unarmed, it's going to draw a sword. If we're not unarmed, which means we're armed, we're going to call new conditions, which are these, and it basically says we have the sword equipped, and we're going to sheath the weapon. So if we're already armed, we're sheathing the weapon. Now these new conditions of bow, we're going to drag these in here. This will have another, and we can't drag them in, of course. So we need to create a new action, and we're going to do call conditions. There we go. Then we're going to drag these in here. So basically it will be, if that's not true, then we go here. So if this is not true, we're going to these conditions. But if this isn't true either, we're going to these conditions. And those will be the bow conditions. And the bow conditions will be really similar. We're going to remove this first is unarmed, because this is unarmed is related to melee. So that's quite important to realize. So we're going to remove them, and we're going to add the new one for shoot. So if you had this problem where you couldn't, sheath it, and basically pressing E again just, made the sword come out again, that's because you were using the shooter is armed. So, important little detail. So now we're using the shooter is unarmed, and we're going to check if he has the bow. Then obviously we're not going to draw a sword anymore, so we're going to draw a weapon, so a shooter module weapon, and that will be our bow. I'm going to remove the weight, and I still have to come up with a nice way to properly match the animations. Right now the animations just are too long, and it won't match really no matter you know, what I try here. So we'll at some point later on, when it comes to refinement, do some animation editing. Now, if you've seen my video on that for drawing and sheeting, you can obviously go ahead and do it yourself as well. But yeah, it's something I'll address later, and you know, that's one of those refinement details. So it won't be absolutely perfect right now, but it will be at some point. So yeah, we're drawing a bow. Then if we are armed, then we go into this conditions. We need to make sure this is set to the bow again. We need to remove these, and I'm going to remove our wait time straight away as well. So we're going to add this one. We're going to add our bow, and there should be sheet, not, what is it called again? Holster. There, yeah, there we go. So holster weapon. And this works the same with melee, it just holsters automatically. You don't need to specify which one it is. And then when it comes to attachment, we do need to attach our bow again. There we go. So that's it. So there's not going to be any else for now. Maybe we'll add it, but yeah, that's really it. So it's not really all that complex really, but yeah, we just need to mess around a bit with conditions. So that's it for equipping, and yeah, that's mostly going to be it for the basic steps. Now obviously we need to make sure our enemies can actually take damage from these bows, because right now they won't. But let's actually first start off with hitting play and see what happens. Let's pick up both of these and actually playtest if that works correctly. So we're picking up our sword and we're picking up our bow. So we're going to equip our sword. And yeah, that works fine. Blocking works fine. We're good there. And this resheets it all well. So we're going to now equip our bow. Hit the same button. And yeah, as you can see, there's, you know, definitely delay with the animation. I just, yeah, couldn't make it work without tweaking animations for now. And we're going to hit 6. He will reload. Now I'm not going to shoot, and I'm going to let go. And you see he still has his arrow, so if we hit 6 again, it will actually work. So he'll skip that part. And yeah, when we let go, we shoot the arrow. So that's all working fine. So good to know. Now let's hit save just to be sure. And next up, we need to make sure our enemy actually does take damage from this. And that's fortunately going to be incredibly easy. So let's pick him up. And the same is going to go for the wolf. You know, there's no difference, it's just the character. We already added character shooter because of the combat module, and you need to make sure that that's added. Otherwise, the trigger for taking damage is not going to work. So we're going to add a new trigger. I'm going to move it up. I do want them to be grouped together. So they're for damage again, and we're going to change this to receive shot. And we need conditions and an action. Now luckily we already set up those conditions, so we can remove these, the new ones we created. And we're going to add life and death again, and we're going to add damage effect again. Now I do want to note one important detail, and it's something I'm not going to do right now yet because we haven't really properly done anything for weapon damage. But if you want to have that straight away, you do need to make sure that if you are planning on having different damage outputs for swords and weapons, I will address that in a tutorial. We're going to set up different weapon damage is set up properly. If you want to have that straight away and you can't wait, obviously you can't be using the same life and death conditions for the sword and bow the way it is working now. In the end you will be. We're not going to set up multiple, it will just be the same, but we'll be playing around with variables. But just keep in mind that the damage it's taking is still from this list variable. So you'll need to do a bit more than that if you want to, well, have different damage outputs. And I will definitely address that in a tutorial. That's a completely different subject, more related to inventory, and we'll have a look at armor, etc. as well. But I just wanted to highlight that. So right now it will be the same damage for both the bow and the sword, but that's only going to be temporary. So keep that in mind. So yeah, there we have it. Now he's also targetable, but it's optional. So we have everything set up. And there's just the one thing I do want to address. So when we go to our preferences and we go to sword and we go to bow, I'm going to add a condition. Now the reason for this condition is that right now if you have the sword drawn, for example, you can go to your inventory, attach the bow, and it will become a bit messy. So the condition is going to be really simple. And wait, which one is this again? This is a sword, okay. So shooter is armed, needs to be is unarmed. So that's our condition. So we can only equip this if we are unarmed with our bow. And we're going to do the same with our bow, but then the condition will be related to melee, and again is armed, and we're going to change that to unarmed. Now that's why it's so important to add this properly through the menu, because as you can see the actions just end up having the same name. So yeah, pay attention to that. Cool, so we're going to give this a try. We're going to try to damage him as well. So let's pick this up. And I'm picking up the sword as well, because I do want to test what I just did, because in all honesty, I haven't actually tried this. So let's just hope this condition actually works. Huh, okay. That does seem to work. That's interesting. So let's sheet it, and yeah, now we can switch. Okay, so that's pretty cool. I know I'm not supposed to sound surprised, but this is actually something while, trying all of this I didn't do yet, and I just thought, oh, I'll do that in the video. So I'm just happy it works straight away. And yeah, we can use locking as well, and we're shooting, and yeah, he's taking damage. Yay, we're all good. And obviously we can look at having a fast switching system. Luckily the combat module actually has some really cool things for that, so that's pretty nice. We have in the combat module we have the weapon stash, and that actually would allow us to fastly switch, so we're definitely going to have a look at that, especially because I would like to switch out arrow types real fast in real time like that as well, which is going to be pretty nice. So yeah, that's it, all working as it should. This was a lot shorter than yesterday's video, but once you've already set up a lot of these things, it becomes a lot easier to do everything else. So hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please hit like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.